The ice test was simple. Survive. It wasn't a battle, a negotiation, or a war of ships and weapons. It was a challenge older than civilization itself. A planet, frozen and merciless, orbiting a dying star at the edge of the Perseus arm. No warmth, no atmosphere to speak of, no mercy. The Galactic Council called it Zenthos 7, but among the species of the stars, it had a far simpler name, the ice test. And no species survived it. For millennia, they had tried. The amphibious Iraq, with their temperature-regulating skins, had perished within hours. The insectoid Dravari, masters of burrowing and shelter-building, froze solid beneath the first storm. The silicon-based Lithari, proud and crystalline, shattered like glass under the crushing ice sheets. The ice test didn't discriminate. It didn't care how advanced your technology was, how proud your empire stood, or how clever your biology made you. It devoured them all. It became a rite of passage, a whispered challenge. Any species that believed themselves evolved enough to conquer the stars inevitably set their eyes on the ice test. And inevitably they failed. Then came the humans. The Galactic Council barely noticed them at first. Just another mammalian species from an unremarkable blue planet at the edge of the Orion Spur. They spread quickly, loud, chaotic, dangerous in their unpredictability, but no different than the dozens of others that had come before. Until they applied for the ice test. Ambassador Kithral of the Jelvani League almost laughed when the petition arrived. He had seen it before. The bravado, the naivety. He reviewed the human application, expecting bold declarations and hubris. Instead, it contained only 3 words: "We are ready." The council debated, as they always did. Some argued the humans deserved their chance. Others declared it a waste of resources and lives. The ice test had no survivors. Sending another species, especially one as young and volatile as humanity, was a pointless tragedy. But the humans were stubborn and curious, and, as the universe would soon learn, entirely unlike any species that had come before. The council relented. They approved the expedition. Quietly, they prepared memorials. The human ship, a bulky, utilitarian freighter named the Aurora's Edge, arrived at Zenthos 7 standard months later. It wasn't sleek or beautiful like the ships of the Jelvani. It wasn't armed to the teeth like the Carnix Raiders. It was simple, functional, covered in thick thermal plating and reinforced alloys, its engines humming with a quiet confidence. Ambassador Kithral watched the live feeds from orbit with a detached curiosity. He'd seen enough doomed missions to recognize the signs. The humans deployed landers, 10 of them, each carrying teams of scientists, engineers, and specialists. And among them, civilians? Kithral zoomed the feed. Small groups, bundled in thick furs, stepping onto the ice with practiced ease. Their faces weathered, their movements deliberate, not the brash soldiers or eager scientists he expected. These humans moved like people who had walked on ice before. Confused, Kithral accessed their personnel files. They weren't soldiers. They weren't scientists. They were Inuit. The term puzzled the translator. Indigenous, Arctic adapted, survivalists. Generations of humans who had lived on the frozen edges of their home world, mastering snow and ice long before their species ever reached for the stars. Kithral frowned. Other species had tried this tactic, sending their most cold-adapted, most resilient. It never worked. The ice test was not comparable to a frozen biome. It was absolute. But the humans weren't here to conquer the ice. They were here to understand it. For days, the council watched. The Inuit didn't deploy thermal shelters or energy barriers like their predecessors. They built igloos, domes of compacted snow and ice, their shapes simple yet precise. Within, their body heat alone maintained livable conditions. Their tools were primitive by galactic standards: stone blades, bone hooks, small controlled fires. But they worked. They hunted, tracking the scarce life hidden beneath the ice sheets. Xenthos, 7 held creatures unknown to most, burrowers and swimmers lurking in subglacial oceans, sustained by geothermal vents deep below. The Inuit found them. They fished through ice holes, their methods eerily similar to those they had practiced for thousands of years on Earth. They constructed sleds, traversing the endless plains of snow. They melted ice for water, rationed supplies, and endured. Kithral was fascinated. Other species brought technology to the ice test. The humans brought knowledge. Generations of it. Cultural muscle memory, forged in frozen winds and blizzards, now applied on a world colder than any they had ever known. Weeks passed. The humans remained. The storms came, violent, shrieking gales of ice and frozen debris that buried structures and shattered equipment. The human machines failed, as predicted, but their igloos stood. Their fires burned. Their people survived. When the first month ended, the council was stunned. No species had lasted more than 10 days. The humans endured 30. By the second month, they weren't merely surviving. They were thriving. They constructed vast networks of ice tunnels connecting their igloos. They mapped the terrain with an unsettling efficiency, reading subtle shifts in the snow and ice that warned of danger. They located stable geothermal vents, creating pockets of warmth. They adapted. It was not arrogance. It was not defiance. It was quiet, relentless determination. Kithral attended an emergency session of the council as whispers of the impossible spread. The Jelvani ambassador addressed the assembly. The humans have not merely survived the ice test. They have integrated. The room buzzed with disbelief. The Karnak's representative hissed. Technology fails. How do they persist? They do not rely on technology, Kithral replied. They rely on tradition. Screens displayed images from Xenthos 7. Inuit families teaching younger generations to read ice fissures. Hunters returning with strange, alien fish. Engineers working side by side with elders, applying ancient methods to modern materials. The council had always viewed survival through the lens of power. Firepower, technology, genetic manipulation. The humans viewed survival as a cultural inheritance, and they were winning. By the third month, they did something no species had dared attempt. They melted the ice. Small operations at first, carefully controlled fires in deep tunnels, redirected geothermal heat. The ice didn't break, as it had for others. It yielded. Rivulets of water flowed, collected, repurposed. Then small greenhouses appeared, encased in transparent domes of ice, warmed by reflected light and subtle heaters. Sprigs of earth vegetation poked through nutrient-enriched soil. Life. The ice test was supposed to be the graveyard of civilization. The humans were building a settlement. By the 6th month, it was undeniable. The ice test was broken, but not by force. The humans had not waged war on Xenthos 7. They had not tried to dominate it with superior technology. They had observed, learned, respected, and adapted. Kithral visited the planet personally. The cold was biting, seeping into the layers of his thermal suit, but the human settlement was warm, impossibly so. Igloos dotted the landscape, their entrances facing away from the wind. Ice tunnels crisscrossed beneath the surface. Fires crackled within, their smoke carefully vented through narrow chimneys. Children played on the ice. Adults worked, fished, harvested small hydroponic crops. Elders told stories beneath the stars. It was not the image of conquest the council expected. It was home. Commander Elise Grant greeted Kithral near the central igloo. She wore a fur-lined parka, snow clinging to her boots. Her eyes were sharp, but her posture was relaxed. "You doubted us," she said without malice. Kithral inclined his head. "We doubted everyone." Grant smiled faintly. "Fair enough." He gestured to the settlement. "You passed the ice test." Grant shook her head. "No one passes. You don't win against a world like this." She looked out across the frozen expanse. "You listen. You adapt. You live." Kithral considered her words. The council would struggle to accept this. The test was not supposed to be survivable. It was a reminder that nature, at its most extreme, was beyond control. But the humans never try to control it. They learn from it. The first species to melt the ice, build shelters from snow, and turn a frozen tomb into a living settlement. Kithral offered a rare Jelvani gesture of respect, pressing his palms together and bowing slightly. "The council will rewrite the records." Grant chuckled. "Good. Make sure they spell Inuit correctly." The council did more than rewrite the records. They visited, they studied, they listened, and in time they understood. The ice test was never about defeating the cold. It was about understanding that survival isn't measured in force, but in wisdom passed down through generations. It is measured in igloos that shield from the wind, in ice melted with careful fire, in food harvested from beneath the frozen seas. The humans did not survive the ice test because they were stronger. They survived because, long before they reached the stars, they had already passed it on their own world. The frozen wastes of Zinthos, 7 echoed with new sounds now. Laughter, the hiss of melting ice, the quiet, ancient songs of a people who knew that the cold is not the enemy. It is simply life. And humanity? Humanity always finds a way.